It's not about getting every decision right.
Nope.
It's about approaching each choice with intention and awareness.
Right.
And using the tools and frameworks that we've discussed to make the best possible bets.
And remember, sometimes the best bet is to fold and walk away.
Absolutely. Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive on making high-stakes decisions.
Sounds exciting.
Yeah, it really is, especially if you're like me and you want to kind of up your decision-making game when the pressure's on. So we're going to explore this fascinating concept called thinking in bets from Annie Duke's work. And it's all about learning how to make smarter choices, especially when we're facing a lot of uncertainty. I think we all have that experience of judging decisions solely on how things turn out. It's like that classic line, everything worked out in the end, but is the decision really good just because it had a happy ending?
That's a really good question. It brings up something that I think is really at the core of the way we think as human beings, right? We're wired to look for patterns, and we try to connect the dots, even if those connections may not actually be there. So we often fall into this trap, and Annie Duke calls it resulting, where we incorrectly link the quality of a decision to its outcome.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Result.
Yeah, and it's like, like if we're at the roulette wheel and somebody wins big, we assume they must be some kind of gambling genius when it's really just luck.
That actually reminds me of that Super Bowl play where Seattle Seahawks coach Pete Carroll called a pass.
Right.
And it resulted in an interception and a loss. Everyone criticized that decision so harshly.
Oh my gosh, yes.
But if you look at the data, the probability of an interception on that play was so low, like 2 or 3%.
Exactly.
And so a touchdown or an incomplete pass, statistically, were way more likely outcomes. But because of that one unlucky result, the decision instantly got labeled as bad.
It's so true. And this is why it's crucial to separate the quality of a decision from the quality of the outcome. So in that situation, he made the best possible decision with the information available to him at the time, just like in poker, right? You can make the best decision and still lose.
Yeah, that makes sense.
There's always this element of chance.
Yeah, so it's so easy to fall into that trap of thinking, well, if it worked out, it must have been a good decision.
Right.
But we know that's not always the case.
Yeah.
And this is making me think back on my own decisions. Like, did I miss chances to learn from the process? Just because things happened to turn out okay?
You bring up a great point, and this is where the concept of thinking in bets can really be a game changer. It encourages us to move away from that black and white thinking, good decision, bad decision, and accept that no decision is a guaranteed win.
Right.
It's all about acknowledging those probabilities and making the best bet we can with the information that's available to us at the time.
Okay. So if we can't just rely on outcomes, how do we actually get better at making those tough calls, especially when the stakes are high?
Well, Annie Duke suggests one of the most powerful tools is to build what she calls a learning pod.
Okay.
So picture this. You've got a group of trusted people who can give you honest, and this is key, unbiased feedback on your decisions. It's like your own personal decision-making think tank.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
But to be clear, we're not talking about surrounding yourself with yes men.
Right. No, absolutely not.
You need people who will challenge you and bring different perspectives to the table.
You need people who are going to poke holes in your ideas.
Yes, exactly.
And actually, to really get the most out of your learning pod, Annie Duke lays out this great framework she calls CUDOs.
Okay.
And it stands for communism, universalism, disinterestedness, and organized skepticism.
Okay, break those down for us. How do those play out in this learning pod?
Sure. So communism in this context just means that everybody shares all the information they have, even the stuff that might be uncomfortable to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And universalism means you're applying the same standards of evaluation to the feedback, no matter who it's coming from.
Okay.
Disinterestedness is all about being aware of any conflicts of interest and aiming for that objective truth. And finally, organized skepticism, and this is so important, means encouraging healthy debate and pushing back against groupthink. We don't want everyone just agreeing with each other.
I'm already thinking about how to put together my own learning pod. Just hearing you describe those CUDOs makes so much sense to me.
It can be so valuable.
I can think of so many times when that open and honest feedback would have been invaluable.
It's amazing how much clarity you can gain just by talking through your decisions with others, especially people who have that different lens,
Right.
it helps you uncover blind spots and potential risks you might have completely missed on your own.
So we've got this thinking in bets mentality. We've got our trusty learning pod to help us out. What are some other tools we can use to navigate those really high-pressure situations?
Yeah, so Annie Duke talks about this technique called mental time travel.
Okay.
And it's all about considering the perspectives of your past and future selves when making a decision.
I love that. It's like that Jerry Seinfeld bit about Night Jerry and Morning Jerry. Night Jerry wants to stay up late and have fun, and then Morning Jerry's left dealing with the consequences. It's like two versions of ourselves battling it out.
That's a great way to put it.
So when you're facing a tough decision, imagine your future self looking back on that choice.
Yeah.
Would they be happy with the path that you took?
Right. Would you regret it?
I think that exercise can really help you factor in your long-term goals and those potential consequences so you're not making decisions just based on short-term gratification.
I think it's so helpful.
I'm starting to see how all these concepts connect and build on each other.
Right.
It's like we're building this decision-making muscle,
Yeah.
one tool at a time.
And like any muscle, it takes practice.
Yeah.
So that's why that learning pod is so valuable, It gives you a safe space to test out your decision-making skills,
Right.
get that feedback, and continuously improve.
Yeah, so you have a personal trainer for your brain pushing you to get stronger.
Yeah.
Okay, now you mentioned something in one of the sources called the two-way door test.
Yes.
What is that?
Okay, so this is a concept that Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, made really popular. And he talks about two-way door decisions as those that are easily reversible. So think about trying out a new productivity app.
Okay.
Or experimenting with a different morning routine. If it doesn't work out, you can always just go back to what you were doing before.
Yeah.
You haven't lost anything.
It's like you're not as worried about making the wrong choice.
Exactly.
Because you can always change course.
Right. So recognizing those low-stakes opportunities helps you reduce the pressure and get more comfortable with experimenting.
Okay, so that makes sense. It takes some of the fear out.
Exactly.
But what about those really big, life-altering decisions that feel more like a one-way street?
Yeah.
How do we approach those?
Right. So that's where Annie Duke talks about what she calls the sheep in wolf's clothing decision. So sometimes what seems like a major, irreversible choice might actually have less impact than we initially think.
So it's like we're blowing things out of proportion in our minds.
Yeah, we might be overthinking things.
Yeah.
Making it seem way more dramatic and permanent than it actually is.
Like choosing a college major.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that feels huge, but people change careers all the time.
Right.
Or even something like moving to a new city.
Right.
I mean, it might seem like this huge leap,
Yeah,
but you can always move back.
exactly. Or to a different city.
Or to a different city if it's not the right fit.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing we often overestimate the permanence of our choices. And I feel like having that learning pod could be really helpful here, just talking things through with others
Yeah, it can really help.
to get a more balanced view and avoid getting stuck in that analysis paralysis.
Absolutely. It can help you see things from different angles.
Okay, so we've got our decision tree, we're thinking in bets, we've got our learning pod assembled, and we're using mental time travel to check in with our future selves. Anything else we should keep in mind as we navigate those big decisions?
Oh, yeah. Here's a great tool from Annie Duke. It's called the monkeys and pedestals model.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What is that one?
It's a metaphor for how we approach projects and challenges. So imagine you're tasked with training a monkey to juggle on top of a pedestal.
Okay, all right.
Now, most people would probably start by building the pedestal. They'd focus on what seems like the easier task first.
Right, get that foundation in place before you move on to the harder stuff.
Right. But Annie Duke suggests that we should actually flip that approach. Start with the hardest part first,
Okay.
which in this case would be training the monkey to juggle. Because if you can't train the monkey,
Right.
that pedestal you built becomes totally irrelevant.
That is brilliant.
Right?
I love that analogy.
And so by tackling the hardest part first, you gain so much valuable information.
Yeah.
If it turns out you can't train that monkey, you can change your strategy or abandon the project altogether.
That's such a good point.
And you're going to save yourself so much time and resources that way.
It's like a built-in early warning system for potential roadblocks.
It is.
So now we have this incredible toolkit for making those high-stakes decisions.
Yeah.
But what about the emotional side of things? How do we handle that fear, that doubt, that second guessing that often comes with making big decisions.
Right. Well, Annie Duke addresses this directly, and one strategy she highlights is the pre-mortem.
Oh, the pre-mortem, right. So it's like
Remember that.
imagining your project has already failed and figuring out what went wrong.
Exactly.
Okay.
So by mentally fast-forwarding to a negative outcome, you can actually identify and address those potential risks
Right.
before they have a chance to derail your efforts.
So it's like doing a risk assessment in advance rather than waiting for those problems to pop up and then trying to, scramble to react.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're prepared.
Exactly. And by confronting those fears and doubts head on, you can take away their power and make more rational, informed choices.
I love that.
Yeah.
This has been such a great conversation so far.
Yeah.
I already feel so much more equipped to handle those high-pressure situations.
Good.
Any other wisdom you want to share before we move on?
Just remember that every decision, no matter how small, is a chance to practice and get better at this whole process. Don't be afraid to experiment, to fail, and to course correct along the way.
Great advice.
Yeah,
It's all about the journey
absolutely.
and getting more comfortable with that uncertainty.
Exactly.
So we talked about shifting our mindset, building our support system, and even doing a little mental time travel. But let's get even more practical in our next segment. What are some tangible tools we can use to actually improve our decision-making process, especially when the stakes are high? I know we touched on decision trees earlier. Can we dive into those a bit more?
Absolutely. Decision trees are a great way to visually map out the possibilities. You can think of them like a flow chart, right? Each branch represents a different choice and the potential outcomes that could stem from that choice. So it really forces you to think through all the different scenarios, consider how likely each one is to happen, and weigh those potential consequences.
Like you're creating a roadmap for your decision. Like you can see all those potential detours and destinations laid out in front of you.
That's a great analogy. And by assigning probabilities to each outcome, you start to think more in terms of bets rather than guarantees. So it helps you move away from black and white thinking and embrace that uncertainty that's inherent in most decisions.
Okay, so instead of saying, if I take this new job, I'll definitely get promoted, you're saying, okay, if I take this job, there's maybe a 60% chance of getting promoted within 2 years, a 25% chance of staying at the same level, and a 15% chance of things not working out.
Exactly. It allows you to quantify your beliefs. And that way you become more aware of the risks and potential rewards that are associated with each choice, right? It's a more nuanced and realistic way to approach decision making.
Okay, so we've got our decision tree all mapped out. We've got our branches, our probabilities. What's next? How do we actually make the decision?
That's where your goals and your values come in. So what are you ultimately trying to achieve? What trade-offs are you willing to make? It's like in poker, you have to decide what kind of player you want to be. Are you going to go for those aggressive, high-risk, high-reward plays? Or are you more conservative, trying to minimize your losses?
So it's all about aligning those decisions with your overall strategy, whether that's in your career, your relationships, your personal growth.
Precisely. And I think this is another place where that mental time travel can be really, really powerful.
Oh, yeah.
If you picture your future self looking back on this decision, you can tap into those long-term aspirations and avoid getting sidetracked by those short-term impulses.
I'm really starting to see how these concepts all weave together,
Yeah.
each tool reinforcing the other.
They work together.
And it's like we're building this decision-making framework
Yeah.
that's so much stronger and more robust.
It becomes more sophisticated.
But I'm curious about the idea of quitting. I know it's often seen as kind of a negative thing, but in the context of strategic decision-making, it seems like it could be a powerful tool.
Oh, you're so right. Annie Duke actually makes a really compelling argument for reframing how we view quitting. It's not about giving up. It's about making a conscious choice to redirect your energy and your resources toward a path that's more promising.
I love that. It's about recognizing when a particular pursuit is no longer serving you, is not aligning with your goals.
Right, exactly.
And having the courage to make a change.
Yeah, it's like knowing when to fold your hand in poker
Right.
and walk away from the table, even if you've already invested a lot in the game.
But that's so hard to do. We're often told to stick with things, to never give up, even when it's not working.
That's true. It goes back to how our brains are wired, right?
Right.
We're naturally wired to avoid loss and to cling to what's familiar, even if it's not beneficial. We fall prey to these cognitive biases like loss aversion. So that means the pain of a loss feels way more intense than the pleasure of an equivalent gain.
So we're more motivated to avoid those negative feelings.
Yeah, it's like we're running away from pain.
than we are to actually pursue the positive outcomes.
Exactly. And that can keep us stuck in situations that are just no longer serving us. And then we've got the sunk cost fallacy.
Okay.
So we feel like we have to keep investing in something just because we've already put in all this time, money, effort.
Right. Even if it's clear it's not going to work.
Even when it's clear, yeah.
Like staying in a job you hate just because you've been there 10 years.
Yes, classic example. Or pouring more money into a failing business because you've already invested so much.
Yeah, you just can't let it go.
Right. So it really highlights the importance of separating our emotions from the decision-making process, especially when it comes to quitting. We need to be able to look at things objectively and ask ourselves, is this path truly aligned with my goals and values? Or is it just fear and inertia keeping me stuck?
So how do we overcome those psychological barriers? How do we actually make those tough decisions to walk away? I know we talked about the pre-mortem.
Yeah.
Are there any other strategies we can use?
Yeah, one incredibly valuable tool is finding what's called a quitting coach. So this could be a mentor, a therapist, even a trusted friend who's willing to give you that objective perspective and help you make those hard choices.
So it's like having someone in your corner.
Yeah, to be your accountability partner.
Who can help you see the bigger picture and make sure you're not letting those sunk costs or that fear cloud your judgment.
That's the idea, yeah.
So instead of viewing quitting as this failure, we can reframe it as a strategic move.
Yes.
A way to create space for those new opportunities and growth. It's about recognizing when something's no longer serving us and having the courage to make a change.
Beautifully said. It's about taking ownership of your choices and recognizing that sometimes the most courageous decision is to walk away from something that's no longer aligned with your goals and your values.
This whole conversation has been so insightful.
Good, I'm glad.
I feel like I'm so much more empowered to make those tough decisions.
Yeah.
And embrace that thinking in bets mentality. Any final thoughts or takeaways you want to leave our listeners with before we wrap things up?
Yeah, just remember that decision-making is a skill that you can develop and refine over time. So be patient with yourself. It's all about embracing uncertainty, seeking diverse perspectives, and constantly learning from your experiences. Don't be afraid to experiment, to fail, to course correct along the way.
Love that. It's not about getting every decision right.
Nope.
It's about approaching each choice with intention and awareness.
Right.
And using the tools and frameworks that we've discussed to make the best possible bets.
And remember, sometimes the best bet is to fold and walk away.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of decision-making.
My pleasure.
We hope you've gained some valuable insights, and we'll see you next time.